Hello friends! Today I'm going to teach you how to draft your very first knitting pattern, which is personally my favorite thing about knitting is I love designing patterns. But there's plenty of things that I wish I knew when I started. One of the fun things about designing sweaters is that even though it seems like kind of simple on the face of it, of like, it's a sweater, they're all the same, they're really not. There's like so many different ways that you can knit the same sweater. You can do bottom up, you can do top down, you can do like short hold row shaping, increases, decreases. You can even like get like really complicated and start doing like pleats and folds and various darting and that kind of stuff. But knit pattern designing is its own skill, very separate from sewing or like designing a pattern for sewing, because unlike sewing, you have to knit in whole numbers. So that makes it a bit of a unique challenge. So before we get into any of the bones of the tutorial, just a real quick note is I'm not a professional. I do sell a lot of the patterns that I make, but I never went to fashion school or anything. So this is all first-hand experience from just a regular guy of how I learned to knit patterns. This is going to be the bare bones of how to knit a pattern. It's going to be really simple. I will try to keep this video as short as possible, but I enjoy being thorough and I want to give you the most information that I can without making it so much information that it's like not digestible. So hopefully this video is not too long, but I will do my best to teach y'all the very basics of how to design your very first pattern. And step one is sketch your design. There's tons of different types of sketches, but the ones that I really end up using the most is a flat sketch / technical sketch and a croquis. A croquis is like a sketch of what it would look like on a stylized model. How the pattern would look when it's done in motion on a person. That's just for vibes. If I do one of those, it's just to kind of help me cement the idea of the vibe that I'm going for, the overall feel of the pattern. But regardless of if I make a croquis sketch or not, I always do a flat sketch with some technical aspects thrown in there. So a flat sketch is a drawing of the pattern as if it was a two-dimensional piece of paper. So say what you're knitting has a bunch of fabric, so when it falls, it's drapey, and it like, if you were to draw a croquis, it would have this kind of shape. But you're not gonna knit it like that. The actual pattern, if you just kind of dropped it and we're looking top down, completely spread out, is just a wide, flat piece. So that is the flat sketch / technical drawing. Because what it helps you do is imagine how it should look coming off of your machine or coming off of your needles. Obviously, I do a lot of machine knitting, but I started off as hand knitting, and so this can really be interpreted for either machine or hand knitting. So for this tutorial, we are making a boxy, slightly oversized crew neck sweater, which I drew here. So keep your drawing, and we are going to annotate on it as we go. See, we already made it through step one. Step two, measurements. You need to know your audience for this one. Who are you making the sweater for? Are you making it for you? Are you making it for a friend? Are you making it for somebody you don't know? Or are you trying to create patterns that have multiple size ranges? For the sake of simplicity, we're not even gonna go into that subject because it's very complicated and that could straight up be a video on its own. So in this case, because it's your very first sweater, you are going to be making this for one individual, either yourself, somebody else. But in either case, you need to have measurements for this person. And you need to either have the physical body measurements or the desired garment measurements. What's different about those? Well, I've got a great example for you. This shirt is bigger than my body. And I don't mean to say that to insult your intelligence or anything, but the garment measurements are different than the body measurements. And sometimes when you're first starting off, I found that it was easier to find a sweater that I liked, one that fit me well, and just measure that and be like, okay, I'm not doing any math. Aside from the stitch calculations, I'm just going to copy a sweater that I like. If you use body measurements, then there will be some additional math of adding ease, which is like adding extra fabric so it's not body tight. The example I'm gonna use are like physical measurements. If you don't know the measurements of the person that you are making this for, you can also use Craft Yarn Council. So they have like general sizes for people, and that's what I base my sizes off of in my patterns. And then they also have like abbreviations. They got a ton of stuff for pattern design specifically. So I highly recommend you check out Craft Yarn Council. Okay, so the most important measurements that you need to get are chest circumference, sweater length, armhole depth, and arm length. Now, there's obviously a couple extra in there that we haven't listed, but I'll get to those soon. This chest circumference that we're using, that is the width of your sweater. So if you personally are like, I would rather the width of my sweater be based on my waist or my hips, use that. This is a Rebecca special recommendation. I strongly recommend measuring everything in centimeters. Why is that? For one, centimeters are better. They go to like multiples of 10. But aside from just liking 10 more than 4, the reason that I use centimeters is because, unlike sewing, we have to knit in whole numbers. You can't knit 52.5 stitches, right? It has to be 52 or 53. It is inevitable that your sweater is not going to be the exact size that you want it to be, because you have to do a little bit of rounding, and you have to do a little bit of rounding at a lot of different steps. So the more precise you can be with your measurements, the closer you'll actually get to your desired fit. So if you have decided that you are going to use a person's measurements, you also need to decide on ease. We touched on this briefly already, but basically you need to decide how big or how tight do you want this garment to fit on the person that you've measured. So positive ease is extra, negative ease is tinier. Standard ease is like standard sizes, like a small at one place is a medium is whatever. The amount of different sites that I've seen that are like standard ease is this and standard ease is that is crazy. It's all different. But to the best of my ability, like averaging it out, for like an oversized sweater, you want 5 to 10 inches of ease. And for a like slim fitting tight body sweater, you want -1 to -2 inches of ease. Also, some people prefer to use percentages of ease instead of like full-on inches. Imagine you do 10 inches of positive ease around the waist of your sweater. And then you're like, oh, I gotta apply the same amount of ease to everywhere, so I'm also gonna do 10 inches of positive ease around my sleeves. That is gonna make so much more of a difference than if the 10 inches were around your waist, you know what I mean? But 20% of ease will always be the same. 20% to the torso, 20% to the arms. So for the example in this video, we are going to be making a standard size M, and we are going to have a positive 7 inches of ease around the bust. Okie dokie, so here are all of the measurements that I'm working with for this pattern. Our chest circumference that we're working with is 94 centimeters plus 7 inches of ease, which is 18 centimeters, is 112 centimeters. And our armhole depth is 18 centimeters. Our arm length is 43 centimeters. However, I'm jumping ahead here just a smidge. The pattern we're creating is the most simple version, so it's going to be a drop shoulder pattern, which means that where our sleeve, like where the torso part of our sweater ends, is actually going to be over our shoulder. It's going to be a drop shoulder sweater. So we can't include this section basically of arm length because we're already including it in the torso. So that's going to be reduced slightly. So I've modified our arm length from 43 centimeters to 35, and sweater length 50 centimeters. So if you take a look at our measurements, you might notice that most of them are flat, except for one. And what do I mean by flat measurements? Basically, armhole depth, here to here. Sweater depth, here to here. Sleeve length, here to here. Chest circumference, here to here. Not flat. Three-dimensional. And because we are working with just one panel at a time, we want to make that two-dimensional. So basically, we just want to know from here to here. But it's important we take the whole measurement because those of us with boobs will alter the way that that works. Because if you just measure from here to here, and then you just measure from the back part to your other underarm but across the back, those two numbers are going to be different. And we just want to even that out, make the front and the back the same, because it's the easiest thing to do in this instance. So that's why we're taking the whole circumference, and then you want to divide it by 2. So our chest circumference of 112 centimeters is now 56 centimeters. Also, sweater length is an easy measurement. I chose 50 centimeters, but this one is kind of just your preference. So the way that I measure that for myself is I just stand up, I take my little measuring tape guy, I put it right at the top of my neck here, the very highest point at which your sweater will sit on your body. And I just drop it all the way down to my waist or wherever I want the sweater to end, and that is how long the sweater is. You'll also notice that the other measurement we're missing is anything to do with the neck hole. That is because I'm just going to give you those values. They are finicky and difficult to work with. So let me just give them to you. The collar opening is complicated because at a minimum, you need to make sure it fits over your head. But what ends up happening is a lot of designs, beginning designs especially, get this unintentional boat shape. So you need something that fits over your head, but isn't super wide and isn't super deep and will actually kind of spring back and sit nicely around the collar. Other thing about necklines is they're not really a circle. They're more like a semicircle, with this being your back and this being the front. So that can make it a little bit harder to calculate. In my work, I've personally found that a good sweet spot for neck width opening is 12 to 15 centimeters. So these are the values we're going to use for our medium neck opening. 13 centimeters for the width, 9 centimeters for the depth in the front, and 3 centimeters for the depth in the back. Because this opening does not include any ribbing. So that 3 centimeters will basically be filled up with ribbing after we add it in. Okay, part 3, the math. This is either my first favorite or second favorite part of designing a sweater. I guess probably the first favorite is just the inspiration portion where it's very like magical. But so this is my second favorite part with doing all of the math. And I know that that's not going to be everybody's favorite part, but you can't get around doing it. However, that doesn't mean you have to lean super hard into it. I have a tendency to lean very hard into it because I enjoy it. So I like making it complicated and structurally interesting. If you're not a huge fan of math, you could be super in love with designing colorfully and doing that kind of stuff and just work with like a basic math setup and not make the structure of the sweater super complicated. So you can't skip the math entirely, but it doesn't always have to be super complicated. The first thing you need to do is make a gauge swatch. So what is the point of the gauge swatch? A gauge swatch is literally a ruler. This is how you know how big each stitch is. Because imagine a stitch that's super huge. Well, 4 super huge stitches next to each other are gonna make a much wider sweater versus 4 itty bitty stitches next to each other are gonna make a very small sweater. So your gauge will determine how your sweater fits. So it is annoying to knit one, but you must, especially if you are designing a pattern. I don't usually rant, but oh my god, if you design a pattern and you don't include a gauge swatch in your pattern, what are you doing? Anyways, start by knitting your gauge. The cool thing about designing a pattern is you don't have to try to fit somebody else's gauge. Just whatever you knit, that's the gauge that you get to work with. So this gauge swatch was 20 stitches by 40 rows, which was 11.5 centimeters by 15 centimeters. So all you do is divide the number of stitches you cast on by the number of centimeters that the length of your gauge swatch is. And that will give you the fraction of how many stitches per centimeter. And then you do the same thing with rows. Number of rows you knit divided by the length of your gauge swatch, and that will give you rows per centimeter. And then the beauty of centimeters, you just multiply that by 10. So our stitch gauge, which was 20 stitches by 11.5 centimeters, becomes 1.7 stitches per centimeter. And then you multiply that by 10, and you have 17 stitches for every 10 centimeters, 17 stitches for every 4 inches. And so our row gauge was 40 rows divided by 15 centimeters gives us 2.5 rows per centimeter times 10, 25 rows for every 10 centimeters. And that multiplied by 10 business is what you'll put on the pattern if you design one. However, I stick with working with the stitch per centimeter because you're not really gonna knit in chunks of 10 centimeters. You're gonna knit per stitch, per row. So I keep it as 1.7 stitches and 2.5 rows per centimeter. And now we just need to calculate the rest of our sweater measurements. So our neck opening changes from 13 centimeters to 22 stitches. Our arm length, armhole depth, and sweater length are all vertical measurements, so for those we use our row gauge. And our sweater length of 15 centimeters times our row calculation of 2.5 rows per centimeter gives us 126 rows. Our armhole depth of 18 centimeters becomes 46 rows, and our arm length of 35 centimeters becomes 87.5 rows. Obviously we can't do 0.5, so I round up to 88. One that's very easy to switch around on accident is arm length. I know I just told you that it's a row calculation, but if you think like, oh, I measured here to here, that's a horizontal measurement, it should be stitches. But you're not gonna knit it that way. You're gonna knit it sleeve up or sleeve down. So that's why it's a row measurement and not a stitch measurement. Congratulations, you survived the math portion. So step 4, the roughed draft. Now that we have our measurements, we need to figure out how do we apply them. First step is to determine bottom up or top down. I've been told that most people don't like bottom up knitting and strongly prefer top down knitting, but this is my channel. We're gonna knit bottom up. If you haven't designed your own pattern before, maybe you'll like knitting bottom up, who knows? So we wanna take a look at the drawing that we did again. We know generally what we want it to look like. We know we want it to be a total of 126 rows, but we also know there's different sections here. There's like a torso section at the very bottom that doesn't have any shaping. Then there's this area with the armhole. Then there's the area with the neck. And there's also the sleeves. So each of those will take their own step. So starting at the very bottom of our sweater, before we can even work the ribbing, if you want to do ribbing, is we need to figure out how much to cast on. Thankfully, we've already got that number because we did the math. So we know we need to cast on 96 stitches. We also need to decide the repeat pattern of the ribbing. Like, do we want to do 1 by 1 rib, 2 by 2, 2 by 3, 3 by 5, any number by any number? For simplicity's sake, we're going to keep it as 1 by 1. The only thing that I caution you is both hand knitting and machine knitting. It's very important that the first and the last stitches just stay as regular knit stitches. Kind of not as bad in hand knitting, but it will really mess you up with machine knitting. So don't drop these 2 edge stitches when you knit. And now we need to figure out how many rows of ribbing we want. Grab your measuring tape and just kind of eyeball a value you like. I'm gonna go with 5 centimeters of ribbing. And since we know that this is a row calculation, we are going to multiply 5 by 2.5, which will get us 12 rows of ribbing. Now we need to figure out the number of space here in between the ribbing and the armhole. To do that, we need to do a little bit of algebra. I know I said we were done with the math, but hang in there. We know our total number of rows is 126. We also know that we're already using the bottom 12 for our ribbing. And we also know that this armhole section is 46 rows. And that leaves us with just the unknown area that we want to figure out left. And so in a traditional algebra fashion, we want our x to be on its own side of the equation. So to do that, we just subtract our 46 and our 12 from the 126 next to it, and that will leave our x alone on its side, and that will give us a total of 68 rows. After we've knit these 68 rows, we could, if we wanted to, start doing some shaping so that this armhole section has a little bit more of a person fit. It's not just a square. But we're not gonna do that because we're keeping it simple. So all you wanna do here is add a stitch marker or some kind of way to indicate, hey, this is where we're gonna pick up sleeve stitches later. So remember back when I told you that the depth of our collar was 9 centimeters? Well, that equals 22 rows. And the armhole and collar area kind of share a space because this armhole bit continues to extend up as the collar does, but the collar doesn't go all the way down to where the armhole area is. So there's a little bit of space where it's just armhole. So we need to figure out how many rows after we've knit these 68 to go before we reach this collar. So we know that that whole section is 46 rows, and we know that the collar depth is 22. So we just subtract 22 from 46, and that leaves us with 24 rows. So now we are at the collar, and we need to figure out how many of these stitches are we going to cast off initially, because we want the depth obviously to be the certain depth. But do we really want our collar to just be a square, or do we want it to be a nice pretty crew neck? So you can't cast off everything all at once. A good rule of thumb is to cast off about 1/3 of the number of stitches that you are going to do in total. So I will round this down to 6 in our case. So once we cast off stitches in the middle of our panel, we'll only be able to work one side of what we're working with. So that gives us another question, like how do we know where the center of our panel is? What you need to do is take the total number of stitches you have in work, which is 96, subtract the number that we're casting off, which is 6, so we have 90, and then divide by 2, 45. So you're gonna knit 45 stitches, cast off 6, and knit 45 more stitches. And now we're confined to this section until we finish this whole part. We'll cast off and we'll start picking up here and basically do a inversion, the same thing that we're doing here on this side. So now we need to figure out how many decreases do we do. We are going to do 1 decrease every 2 rows. I like to do my decreases on my knit rows. I think they just look cuter. We know we have a total of 16 decreases remaining that we need to do for our collar, but we're only working 1/2 right now. So we're gonna do a total of 8 decreases on this side. And since we're doing 1 every 2 rows, that means we're gonna knit 16 rows at this part. And now we need to check, does this satisfy the condition of how deep we want our collar to be? And in this case, not quite. We want our collar to be 22 rows deep. So now we just follow up those 16 decrease rows with a total of 6 normal rows, and then you cast off. And then you just pick up the stuff on this side here, and you do the same thing. 16 decrease in the center here for every other row, and then 6 normal rows. And that's your first panel done. Now for our back panel. The back panel is exactly the same as the front panel, except for the collar section. And we want our collar width to stay the same, but our depth is significantly smaller. So what that means is we can't have as many decrease rows, right? We are very limited on how deep we're gonna make this collar. And since the depth of the back of the collar is only 6 rows, that really only gives us a chance to do 3 repeats with 1 decrease each. We know that that will decrease 3 on both sides, which gives us 6 cast off stitches, but we still need to get to 22 total stitches to cast off. So we take our 6 that we cast off, 3, 3, 6, and we subtract that from 22, and that gives us a total of 16 cast off stitches. Now that our main front and back panels are done, that leaves us with the collar. So for the collar, I recommend seaming up one of your shoulders, picking up all of the stitches around your neck, and knitting as many rows as you want. Same with the ribbing at the bottom of our sweater. Just kind of go like, yeah, I like 5. Yeah, I like 3. I wouldn't do anything less than 3 because of how deep we made the back of our neck, but it's really up to you overall. Finally, we need to add the sleeves. The stitch markers that we placed in the previous steps will indicate where the sleeve is actually going to start and stop. And so the cool thing about sleeves is you don't need to count what you pick up, you just pick it up. So you just go from stitch marker to stitch marker and you pick up stitches along the way. I recommend picking up 2 and skipping 1. Just because the value that we associate with rows and the value we associate with stitches are different. So if you pick up every single stitch, it's going to kind of like stretch it out. and make it look kind of funky. So if you pick up two, skip one, that should sort of help to even out the difference. And then you just knit the total number of rows that you want for the sleeve, which in our case is 88 rows. But then again, don't forget to include the ribbing at the end. So if you want to do 5 centimeters of ribbing to match the bottom of your sweater, that is 12 rows. So 88 minus 12, which is 76. So you would knit 76 rows regular and then 12 rows of ribbing and then cast off. And guess what, guys? You have your pattern all done. So now that your pattern's done, it's time for you to test it. After that, you just keep going back, making tiny changes, and kind of just altering it to your preference. So I hope you all enjoyed this tutorial. If there was anything that you're like, I don't know, I'm really confused by this, or anything you're interested in seeing, just any questions in general, I'd love to answer those. Feel free to leave them in the comments section. If you want to see more videos like this where I explain how to do stuff, go ahead and like and subscribe, because that will let the algorithm know that this is a cool video. And that will also let me know to make more videos like this. So thank you guys, and I will see you later. Bye!